welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel. In this video, I will show you how to make this mud cloth inspired throw. Isn't this beautiful? It uses many different stitches combined together to create this really fun looking piece. This is a free pattern available at redheart.com. I'll put a link to the pattern in the video description box right down there below. You're going to want to make sure you download that pattern and follow along with me in today's video. While you're down there getting the pattern, be sure to smash that like button, as my kids say. Once you have that pattern and your materials, join me back here. I'm going to walk you through how to read the chart for this pattern, how to learn the stitches, and you'll be on your way to making this really beautiful throw. Marianne Forrestal is the designer of this really beautiful throw, and she combined 3 different stitch patterns for the body of the throw to create this really great look. The instructions for this throw pattern are very wordy. That's just the nature of the beast, right? That's the way crochet patterns are. Honestly, when I downloaded the pattern and started looking through the instructions, I was overwhelmed with the amount of words there were for the pattern. Then I turned to page 3 and I saw that there was a chart. A crochet chart like this is a direct representation of the stitches we're going to use in the pattern. It's very easy to follow once you understand what all of the symbols mean. You begin reading the chart right down here at the bottom where those little circles are. Those represent the chain stitches that you begin your blanket with. As you read the chart, and we're going to turn our blanket back and forth, you read the chart back and forth just like so. Very easy and very concise. This orange square section that you find in each one of these stitch patterns here, that is your stitch pattern repeat. As you're following along with the pattern, whenever you come across an area where maybe there's brackets, or maybe it has an asterisk, or maybe there are parentheses, it's different for various patterns. That's typically where the pattern will tell you to repeat from blah, blah, blah. That repeat is the area that is represented on the chart in that orange section. So as we read this chart and we're following along with the instructions of the chart, obviously this chart doesn't have the total number of stitches that you will have on your full blanket, right? It doesn't have as many as you have on your blanket. But as we start reading the chart and going back and forth, as we start getting through this orange section, you will repeat that orange section over and over across your row until you get to the last few stitches, which are represented out here. Okay, so this orange section is like your asterisk. It's your repeat that you will have in your pattern. I'm going over all of this because I want to show you how easy it is to use charts when you're working with patterns, especially ones like this that are very wordy. Because instead of having to find your place in the row to find out where you are and say, okay, so I just finished this single crochet, what's the next stitch I need to do? It's very easy to follow along with the chart and know exactly where the stitch needs to go and what the stitch needs to be. So that's my goal here in this video. By showing you how to read the chart and working these stitches, you will be able to complete this throw blanket without any problems, okay? That's why I said at the start, it's very important you have your pattern with you as we go through this video. All right, I'm ready to jump in. I'm gonna grab some yarn and a J hook and get started. Let me go ahead and get rid of these first 2 pages because I'm not going to use these. If you want to follow along with the written instructions as we read the chart, you're more than welcome to do that. I will leave that up to you. I'm going to go ahead and grab my yarn here and get started by chaining the total number of chains that I see right here in my chart. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So there's 16 stitches plus 3 chains. So 16, 17, 18, 19. And I can tell here that those 3 chains will count as a stitch because on the following row, there's a stitch made directly into that 3rd chain there. All right, so I have 19 chains I have to work up. So let's go ahead and get those 19 chains made. Once you've completed the 19 chains, you carry on with row 1. As we take a look at the chart, we can see that row 1 has us begin with that stitch right there. And if we count the number of chains, that's the 4th chain. So that would be the 4th chain from hook. And this symbol, the T with 1 slash through it, that's a double crochet. All right, so in American terms, that is a double crochet. And it looks like we're going to do double crochets in each stitch all the way down the row. Now, if you need a refresher on what any of these symbols mean, over here in this area, this is your symbol key. You can always take a look here to find what the symbol means for the instructions, okay? So I'm going to go ahead, move that up here, and let's work our double crochets all the way down the row. We start off with our yarn over, count 1, 2, 3, and in the 4th chain from hook, we will place our double crochet. Pretty simple, you know how to do these simple stitches, so let's just work our double crochets all the way down the row. Once you've completed all your double crochets, your work, if you're doing the little swatch like mine, looks like this. And remember, this initial skipped 3 chains we did down here, that is going to count as a stitch because we're going to work into it on the next row. We just finished row 1. Let's move on to row 2. As we take a look at the chart, we can see that row 2 begins out here on the outside because we have this number 2 out here that allows us to know we're reading the chart in this direction. We can see that this initial chain 2 right here is going to count as a stitch because there's a stitch right on top of it that will be worked into it. So we know that this first chain 2 will count as a stitch, meaning we will make sure we skip this first double crochet and we will start off with our first actual stitch that we make into the second double crochet. Now these stitches here, the symbol is a T without a slash. See how there's a slash down here? That's a double crochet. Up here there's no slash. Those are half double crochets. So that's what that symbol is. This entire row will be made up of half double crochets. There's one more thing that we have to point out when it comes to this chart. Remember that when we work our blanket, we are using 2 different colors. So our chart needs to have a way of representing when we need to change those colors. The way the designer did it on this particular chart is by indicating a color change by using different colors. You can see here in the symbol key that it says color A is either this dark blue color or sort of this lighter blue color, and color B is this dark black color or this gray color. So as we look over here at the chart and we see, oh look, we used color A because it was blue. Now our color of our symbols here are black. That means we're going to have to change colors. And then the symbols on the next row are blue. We're going to have to change colors again, so on and so forth. You'll notice when we get up into, let me move this down, when we get up into this section, that is not really the case. We have blue stitches, which would be our color A, but then there are going to be points where we actually just use our color B. And that is usually done by carrying the other color behind or underneath all of those stitches there. But we'll learn more when we come to that. One thing that is important to point out here is this. Not all charts that have different colors every row indicate a color change. Some charts will show a different color for every row to make it easier for you to see what stitches go on each row. But on this particular chart, the colors actually indicate when you're supposed to change colors. Okay, so that's important. If you are at all in doubt when you're supposed to change colors, just use the words next to your chart to know when it says to change to color B, bind off color A, change to color A, finish off color B, so on and so forth. All right, so if you're ever in doubt, you always have the words there to double check yourself. But if we're just going to use the chart, the way we use this chart in order to know when we're supposed to change colors is by the different colors on the chart. So right here at the end of row 1, I can see that my next row, I'm supposed to use my other color. So I will go ahead and change the color B in the last stitch of row 1. Let's go ahead and go to the last stitch, and I'm going to partially complete it. So I pull through 2 loops, but before I go through these last 2 loops, I'm going to grab my color B, which is going to be this really pretty yellow color, and I am going to pull through those last 2 loops with my color B, okay? Now, I know that I can go ahead and cut my color A, and the reason is because I know this is blurry. On row 3, going back, see how it's color A again? But if I leave it attached down here, my yarn will be down here, and I'll need to use it over here. So that means I need to go ahead and cut my color A, and then I will rejoin it for row 3. So let me go ahead, make sure you leave a nice long tail so that you can weave in your ends. And we can now move on to row 2. So I'm going to chain 2, just like row 2 indicates. Turn my work. I will not work into that first stitch, remember, because the chain 2 counts as a stitch. And then I will just work half double crochets all the way down. And just as I mentioned, row 3 is going to have us using color A again. So in the last stitch of row 2, I will change to color A once again. When you get to the end of the row, remember we will be placing a stitch into the top chain of that chain 3. And we know that because if we're looking at our chart, we can see there's a stitch right there worked into those chains. So I want to make sure and I place that half double crochet into that 3rd chain. And remember, I'm also going to be changing colors on the last pull through here. So I'm going to change to my color A on the last pull through. I can peek down here and see that I have to go back to my color B on row 4. So that means I will have to cut my color B so that it will be available to me, all right? And then I can go ahead and move on. Row 3 gets a little bit interesting. We're going to introduce different stitches and different symbols. So let's take a look at the row 3 instructions on the chart. Once again, row 3, we're going to read it from this direction going that way, and the 3 is over here on the outside, so that's one way to indicate for you to know that you're going to start reading from this direction all the way across. And this is where we are introducing ourselves to our very first real repeat. I mean, down here the repeat was just half doubles. Now we're dealing with actual real stitches here, right? Like an actual stitch pattern. So I'm going to use my pencil here and we're going to point this out. We start off row 3 with the chain 1, and notice that the chain is over here on the outside of the chart. That means that that chain does not count as a stitch, okay? Notice there's no stitches worked into it. It's simply just a turning chain. So you will chain 1, and then we come to a new symbol we haven't seen before. That is a single crochet. So this little squat sort of cross right there, that is a single crochet. And we're building a nice sort of chevron look here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go and complete different stitches that are all going to be different heights, and that will give us this really cool chevron look. So we will do a single crochet in the first stitch, work a half double crochet in the next stitch, a double crochet in the following stitch, and then you come to a new symbol we haven't seen yet. It looks like a double crochet, but see how it has 2 slash marks? That is a treble crochet. Those slash marks, here's what I think about them. Every time you count slash marks on one of the T's, that indicates how many yarn overs you do on your hook before you go into the stitch. So 2 slash marks mean we'll yarn over our hook twice before we go into the stitch and then complete it through our normal crochet action. Pretty cool, right? So this symbol here is a treble. And then we can see right here that we have 3 trebles, right? There's 3 stitches there, and they are all pointing to 1 half double crochet. So we know we're going to put all 3 of those trebles into that 1 stitch. And because each one of those trebles has its own like top hat, I'm going to call it the top hat. It's the top of the T. We know that we're going to complete each one of those fully before you move on to the next. It isn't a cluster. It's going to be completed individually. We will do one treble, another treble, and another treble, all into that stitch. Then we'll do a treble into the next stitch, a double into the next stitch, a half double into the next, and then a single. When you're working on the blanket, you will then repeat all of those instructions that are within the orange square on this chart. So once you complete that single, you would then go back and start off with a half double, double, treble, 3 trebles, treble, double, half double, single. And you would do that all the way down until you get to the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stitches. When you get to the last 8 stitches, you then would work these stitches here, which are identical to that, right? But it makes it so that you know that is how you would finish off the row. For our little swatch, easily enough, we just have to work through this repeat once and then we're already to our last 8 stitches. But this is important as you're working on your blanket because you have far more than the number of stitches than we have on the swatch. So you will repeat what's in that orange square. All right, hopefully this makes sense so far, and let's go ahead, dive in, and complete these instructions for row 3. We start off with that chain 1, and it does not count as a stitch, so it just hangs out there. And we begin with our first single crochet into that first stitch. Now we're going to work our repeat. We do a half double into the next stitch, a double into the following stitch, a treble into this one. And remember what I said about yarning over your hook twice, and that counts for the number of slashes in that symbol. So I've yarned over my hook twice, go into the stitch, yarn over, pull up, and then complete the treble crochet as I normally would. The next stitch, this is where I'm going to do 3 of those trebles, and I'm going to complete each treble before I move on to the next. So here is 1. Here is 2 into the same stitch, and here is 3 into that same stitch. I'm going to do a treble into the next stitch over, a double in the following stitch, a half double in the next one, and then a single. So all of those instructions, with the exception of this single crochet out here, that is your repeat. So you would repeat this down to the last 8 stitches of your row for the blanket. Because we are already to the last 8 stitches, we can carry on with our half double, double, treble, and then we're going to put 3 trebles, treble into the next stitch, a double into the next, a half double into the next, and then remember this chain 2 that we started on the last row counts as a stitch. So my very last stitch will be placed into that chain 2. And it's a single crochet, but I also want to remember that I just finished row 3. Row 4 has us change colors. So in this last stitch here, I'm also going to change colors on my final pull through. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and cut my color A because I know I'm going to have to use it on the other side. And so far, this is what we have. Not so bad yet, right? Let's go ahead and take a look at the instructions for row 4. Row 4, we're going to read our chart into this direction, okay? So we're going to read our chart this direction, and we start off with a chain 3, And that chain 3 will count as a stitch because we can see on row 5 there's a stitch symbol that works right into that one, okay? So this counts as a stitch and it's right there on top of that single crochet, but notice there is not a stitch worked right there in the top of that half double. So we will not put a stitch into the top of that half double. Our very first stitch is actually going to go into the top of that double crochet. Can you see that? We're going to put a double on top of that double. And then we'll do a double on top of that treble, double on top of that first treble of our 3 treble sequence. And then we'll do another three double crochets into that center one. Again, each of them has their own top hat, so they're going to be done independently. Then we put a double on top of that treble, double on top of that treble, double on top of that double, and then here's a symbol we haven't seen yet. These look like double crochets, but notice they don't have their individual top hats. They only have one top hat, right? Can you see what I mean? These all have individual top hats. This one only has one. That is an indication that you will do all of these stitches into those spaces or those stitches, but you will pull them all together and make them one stitch. Another way to think of this is you're going to do a double crochet 3 together. We know it's a double crochet because the symbol itself is a double crochet, but we're bringing 3 of those double crochets together to make one stitch, okay? So we can see here it's a line with a slash, a line with a slash, a line with a slash, but there's only one top hat. So we will work a double crochet 3 together into those 3 stitches from row 3, okay? And then we continue up. So because on this one, we created our peaks and valleys. Right here, we are maintaining our peaks and valleys. In our valleys, we're creating this decrease. So we'll work our way up to the peak again, and then come back down to the valley. We finish off this row by skipping that last half double crochet and working into this single crochet with a double, okay? So here's where the repeat is a little bit tricky here because the repeat is not going to include this half double because as you work these stitches, when you finish this last half double here, that's when you're going to jump back over here to this double crochet 3 together because that's the sequence of the pattern, okay? So it'll be the double crochet 3 together and then work our way up the hill to our peak and do the 3 double crochets independent, work down the hill to the valley, and that's when we jump back over here to our double crochet 3 together because see how the first double crochet 3 together goes into that half double right there? So that half double is right here. Does that make sense? It will make sense as you get going along. You're going to be like, okay, here's a valley, here's a peak, here's a valley, here's a peak, here's a valley, here's a peak. And it'll make sense as you work down your row. All right, so let's go ahead and see how these instructions on the chart transition into an actual sample that we're working on. I'm at the end of my row, so I'm going to go ahead and turn my work and start off with row 4. And it begins with the chain 3. Remember that chain 3 counts as a stitch. I will then move on and I'm not working into this first half double. I'm going to go to the next one and do a double into the next one, and then a double into the next one, which is the first treble of those 3 trebles that were worked into that one stitch. Now you can see here I've worked my way up to the peak, and at this peak, which is in the center of those treble crochets, I will place 3 independent double crochets. So there's 1, 2, and 3. Now I've got to work my way down to the valley, and down here is where I will be doing my double crochet 3 together. So let's work our way down. We will do a double crochet into the next stitch and the next stitch, and the next one. So there's 3 total after we work into our peak. Then we did 3. Now we're going to work into our valley, and this is where we're going to do our double crochet 3 together. All right, we want to have them all finish off as 1 stitch. So I yarn over, go into the first one, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2. Yarn over your hook, go to the next stitch, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2. Yarn over your hook, go to the next stitch, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2. I have 4 loops on my hook. This final yarn over and draw through all 4 loops leaves me with 1 V, okay, 1 stitch at the top, which counts as our top hat. When we did these, see, we did 3 double crochets and each one has their own top of the stitch. Now we did a double crochet 3 together and we only have 1 top of the stitch. So that's the top of our top hat for the double crochet 3 together, okay? So now I can carry on, and this is where the repeat begins, okay? So the repeat is sort of this decrease right here, and then we carry on by working a double crochet into the next 3 stitches. So there's a double, and a double, and a double. So now we're back to the peak. We're in the center of that 3 trebles we did. And we're going to put 3 double crochets. There's 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so that's the peak right there. We did our 3 double crochets. Sorry, my paper is moving around. We did our 3 double crochets. Now I'm going to do 3 double crochets down. 1, 2, and 3. All right, that would be the end of my repeat right here. So there's my double crochet 3 together. I went up to the peak, coming back down, and if this were my blanket, I would then move on into my 3 double crochet working a 3 double crochet together at the end, and just keep repeating that all the way through until you get to the end of the blanket, which is where I am right now on my swatch. So as I'm looking at my swatch, I know I'm going to skip this last half double, and into this single here, I will place a double crochet. And remember, I'll be changing colors again, so I want to make sure I change colors in the last pull through of this double crochet. So there's my 2 loops on my hook. Go ahead, grab my color A again, yarn over, pull it up. I can cut my color B. And I am done with my row 4. Okay, can you see how that's all working out right there? We have our peaks and our valleys and our peaks, and then if we were carrying on, it would be a valley, peak, valley, so on and so forth. It's really not that difficult once you get going along. It's going to make a lot more sense. It's a traditional sort of ripple stitch is what we're doing here. Now let's go ahead and move on and look at row 5. Row 5, once again, we're back over here on the right side of our work, and we're going to be working in this direction. We can see here that we start off with a chain of 1, 2, 3, 4, and does that count as a stitch? Yes, because we can see on row 6, there is a stitch worked into that, okay? It's not out here on the outside like this one, it's in line with the rest of the chart. So we start off with the chain 4, and it counts as a stitch. And then we can see we're carrying on with our sort of ripple stitch going on here, not sort of, with our ripple stitch. And so we begin by skipping this first double. See how there's nothing worked into that first double. And we start off with a treble, because there's 2 lines, a treble into the second double, a double into the third, a half double into that one, single into that one, half double into that one, double into that one, treble into that one. And then we come over here, which we're in our valley again, and we are doing a treble crochet 3 together. Okay, so just like when we did our double crochet 3 together, now we're doing a treble crochet 3 together. And we know it's a treble because it has this basic treble stitch with the 2 slashes, but see how it has the 1 top hat? So that lets you know it's a decrease. It's a treble crochet together, okay? What we're doing here by working essentially in reverse of what we did on row 3 is row 3 allowed us to increase the stitches to get the ripple. Row 4 had us maintain it. Row 5 is we are sort of filling in the ripple spaces so that way we get back to working flat, okay? See how these stitches, they take a nice little shape of this ripple look, but then when we get to row 5, all of them are flat again. They're no longer going up and down. So by working our stitches in this manner, by not increasing in this center, see how we're just doing a single stitch into that center there, and then we're working our decrease right here to fill in those stitches, but we're still leaving it with 1 stitch. This is going to make it so that this section ends up flat and straight. I know it might seem confusing right here as I'm explaining it with my words, but as you work through the swatch or your blanket, it will make a lot more sense. The whole thing here is just make sure you're placing the stitches in the correct placement. I do want to point out once again that we do have our orange section here, which is our repeat. So as you're working across and you're working your repeats, you will work this orange section. And remember, this treble crochet 2 together, it sort of works into that double crochet right there. It doesn't sort of, it does. It works into that double crochet, which is represented right here in this whole space. So as you're working through this repeat, that double crochet right there is already used up by this treble crochet 3 together. All right, let's go ahead and see this in action. I will begin with my chain 4 as the pattern indicates. And then I carry on by working my treble crochet, not into this stitch or this one, but into this one right here. So we start off with our treble crochet. And then we will work a double crochet into the next stitch. A half double in the following, a single crochet in the next one. So that's where we had been doing our increases, but we are not. We're just doing 1 single stitch. All right, so we essentially went reverse in the height. So now we're going to go back into increasing again in our height. So we go a half double, a double, a treble, and now we're going to do a treble crochet 3 together, and it's going to join that one, and that one. So yarn over your hook twice, go into the first stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2, yarn over, draw through 2. We're going to do all that again. Yarn over your hook twice, go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2, yarn over, draw through 2. One more time, yarn over your hook twice, go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2, yarn over, draw through 2. We have 4 loops on our hook. By yarning over, pulling through all 4 loops on our hook, we are left with 1 top of the stitch, right? That's our top hat. But we've completed our stitches into those sections. See how so far our work is nice and flat. It's no longer getting this wave. All right. We carry on with a treble, a double, a half double, a single, a half double, a double, a treble, and then we will skip this last one and place a treble crochet into that third turning chain. Before I go on, do I have to change colors? Yes, I'm going to be changing colors, so I will go ahead and stop there, grab my next color. Maybe. It takes me just a little bit. Make sure you always leave a nice little tail so that you can weave that in. Yarn over, pull through on the last pull through, and there we go. We have a nice, even, straight line. Can you see that? It's really fantastic. We did our increases to create the ripple itself on row 3. Row 4 had us maintain the ripple. That was the one in yellow. And row 5, the one we just finished, has us even it out so that it's nice and straight. Pretty fun, right? Now let's go ahead and work row 6, which is just a row of half double crochets. You can see it in the chart. By this point, you should be able to see what those symbols look like and just working half double crochets all the way across. We start off with a chain 2, and that will count as a stitch, and you can tell that on the chart. And then we will just work our half double crochets all the way across all of these stitches. We're going to get a nice, clean, straight fabric. Don't forget to place a half double crochet into the 4th chain of that turning chain. And we will be changing colors once again here. So make sure you transition to your new color, because we will use our color A for rows 7 through 9 for sure. So I'm going to transfer this over. All right, make sure I pull through. I just did that. I pulled through with my color A. I'm trying to find my color B so I can cut it. Let's take a look here. We can see this is a nice, beautiful section here that we've created with those awesome stitches. Congratulations, you made it through the first stitch pattern of this beautiful blanket. Now we'll carry on, and rows 7 through 9 are just double crochets worked with color A. When we're looking at the chart, we can see that right out here it says rows 7 through 9, we're just going to work these double crochets back and forth. When we get to row 10, that's when things are going to change up again, but we are still using color A. However, we will introduce color B at various points specifically in the stitch pattern. So we will work with color B when the stitch indicates, but then when we're not going to work with it, we'll let it rest right on top of our stitches, and we will use our color A and work it around our color A and the stitch we're working into. That'll make sense as we're jumping into it, but I wanted you to understand how these stitches are going to be worked. One little note of caution: as you're carrying the color B along the top, you want to make sure you're letting it just sort of rest there. Don't pull it too tautly, otherwise it will begin to pucker and pull in that section of your blanket. So we don't want to do that. What I'm going to do now is work a couple rows of double crochets, and we're going to pick up our swatch back here on row 10. And I'm going to show you how to work these stitches across the row carrying our color B. And we're going to discuss what the difference is between this double crochet cluster and this double crochet 3 together, because they both have a single top hat, right? But what's the difference between the two? So let's go ahead, do 3 rows of double crochet, and then we'll jump into row 10. I've worked up 3 rows of double crochets, and I'm ready to begin with my row 10. And let's take a look at the chart here. You can see that there is one singular chain right out here on the outside. Again, we know that that means it's just a chain 1, and it does not count as a stitch because there is no stitch built on top of it. Can you see that? So we will chain 1. We already know what this symbol is. It's a single crochet. So we know we will single crochet over, let's see, those are 4 single crochets. And then we come to a symbol we haven't seen yet. And this symbol here, we can see it sort of looks like a double crochet, right? This center one right here definitely looks like it's a double crochet. But what are these 2 like bulging out things there? Well, those are also double crochets. So if I were to draw this on my own over here, I know it's not completely 100% to scale, but you can see that it's a double crochet into that stitch, a double crochet into that stitch, a double crochet into that stitch. But this is the important factor. See how there's one top hat? See how there's one top hat right there? That means you're going to partially complete those 3 double crochets all into this stitch. And when you get 4 loops on your hook, you're going to draw through all 4 loops to create it so that way it's only 1 stitch at the end, okay? So that's going to give us this sort of bulge that comes out on the fabric. See these black dots? Those are those bulges. Those are the clusters that we're creating, okay? So when we create those, that's what we're doing. The other thing to point out here is you can see that these single crochets are blue, but the cluster is black. That means we're going to change colors for this 1 stitch and then go back to the old color that we used over here for all of these stitches, and then change colors for that 1 stitch and then go back to our normal regular scheduled program. What we're going to do is when we use our color B for that 1 stitch, we are then going to lay color B down right here on top of those stitches, okay? And we will work these single crochets into these stitches and around that color B until we need it again over here. Pretty easy. It's really not as hard as it might sound right now because it's a little bit abstract until we get in to do it. But I wanted to explain how you would read that here on this chart, okay? If we weren't changing colors, it would be just as easy as getting to this cluster and working the cluster and then carrying on and then working the cluster. We wouldn't have to worry about changing colors. But because the designer, Marianne Forrestal, wants those clusters to be a different color, we're going to change their color. Another thing to point out here is that we are going to go from row 10 to row 11. And in row 11, we are not going to use our color B. So that lets us know that when we are at the end of row 10, we are going to fasten off our color B. And when we get back to row 12, where we use it again, we will rejoin our color B and use it in the same manner as we did here in row 10. The same thing holds true as you carry on through the pattern and you get up to row 18 and so on and so forth, okay? So let's work through this row and then go back to this row, and then we will work through this row because all the differences between this one and this one is the placement of the cluster. We're just placing it between, so that way we get a nice zigzag, right? So we have 2 out here, and then this cluster is right here in the center. And then when we get to these ones, they're on the outside again. So we get a nice symmetrical look to our clusters. But once you get through the row with the clusters built into it, and then the following row, you should be right as rain. You should be able to move right along, whether you're following the chart or following the pattern through the number of rows you have to do this particular stitch pattern. So let's go ahead and jump in and make these clusters. Row 10 has us begin with that chain 1, and then we single crochet across 4 stitches. So let's go ahead and work our single crochets across 4 stitches. And this is where we're going to change colors and work our cluster in the next stitch. So I'm going to grab a different color so that you can see how this is going to be different. I'm grabbing a darker color this time. And before I finish this last pull through, I'm going to change colors just like we've been doing all along. Okay, it just happens that we're doing it mid-row. All right, so I changed colors. So this next stitch is where I'm going to work my cluster. So I yarn over my hook, go into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2. Yarn over my hook, go into the same stitch, yarn over my hook, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2. Yarn over my hook, go into the same stitch, yarn over my hook, pull up a loop, yarn over my hook, draw through 2. So I have 4 loops on my hook, okay? I have the 3 double crochets partially completed, yarn over, draw through all 4 loops on my hook, so that leaves me with 1 top hat, right? Just the top of the stitch, but I've created the cluster. Here's the trick though. We need to go back to use our color A. All right, so our color A is all the way over here, and I need to use that color A on my final pull through. So I'm going to undo that last pull through I did. Right there. And I'm going to drop my color B, grab my color A, and use my color A for my final pull through. Now my color A is on my hook. I'm going to let my color B rest just right on top of those stitches. And now I'm going to single crochet across the stitches I need to go across, okay? So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 singles. So I'm going to go into the stitch, let the color B just hang out, and work my single crochet. When you give that a good pull, you're going to see that really pops out that cluster. See how you get some texture going on there? So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this is 7. Remember, we want to change colors, so I'm dropping my color A, grabbing my color B, and letting my final pull through be my color B. So that way it's on my hook and I'm ready to begin my cluster. You ready to do another cluster? Here we go. Yarn over your hook, go into the stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop. Yarn over, draw through 2. Yarn over your hook, go into the same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2. Yarn over your hook, go into the same stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, draw through 2. You have 4 loops on your hook. You want to do your final pull through with your color A. So drop color B, pick up color A, yarn over, and pull through. Now I want to point something out. My color A is coming from this stitch and it's coming from behind here, okay? If I wanted to, I could work my cluster on top of my color A, so that way my color A is over here on this side when it's time to pick it up. I want to show you what that looks like because it might be something that is easier for you to do and it might look a little bit better on your blanket. So I'm going to undo these clusters and show you exactly what I mean by that. So I'm going to undo all of this, undo those clusters, wah, wah, wah. And I'm back to where I pulled up my color B through the last stitch of my color A. Now, just like when we worked our color A on top of our color B for all of those stitches, I'm going to work this cluster on top of color A for this one stitch. So that way my yarn is over here on this side, okay? So I'm going to yarn over. Let's get our cluster. I'm not going to talk you through this one because I've done it a couple times now. When you get the third partially completed double, this is where we have 4 loops on our hook. I'm ready to yarn over and go through all 4 loops, but see now my yarn is over here on this side waiting for me. It's no longer over there having to travel. So I can drop my color B, pick up my color A, yarn over, and pull through. Can you see how that works? So now there's no longer a float going on back there with color A. We have a nice clean transition. This is the point where I'm going to the end of the row. So if this were your blanket, obviously you would carry on continuing to make these clusters. But when you get to the end here, we don't have to carry our yarn along these stitches to the end. We can go ahead and cut our color B, leave a nice tail so that it's there ready to be woven in later. And we can finish off our row here with our single crochets just like normal. All right, so we can work our single crochets. Remember, if you give that a nice little pull, it really makes that cluster pucker out there. And we finish off with our 4 single crochets. Remember, you do a single crochet into that turning chain because it counts as a stitch. And voila, we have some nice clusters popping up out of our fabric. The floats that go along the row, they do show ever so slightly, okay? They do show. So you want to be really careful about that. But overall, It's a really great technique. Now, the next row, we're only going to use color A, and we're going to double crochet all the way back. And we start off by working a chain 3. And you can see this in the chart. You already know how this looks. The chain 3 counts as a stitch, so we will not work into that first one. We'll put a double into the next, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and go down this row with our doubles. When you get to the end of the row, you are not changing colors, so we're going to carry on. We will turn our work and we move on to row 12. So before I go on to row 12, let's go ahead and take a look at how row 12 looks in the chart once again, just so we're all on the same page and know what's going to happen. Row 12, you can see that the 12 is out here, so we're going to read it in this direction. Very similar to what we did on row 10, we're going to do single crochets across, but notice that the cluster is right in the middle between these two, okay? So that's the difference here, is that we're just moving the placement of our cluster. Everything else is very similar to how we did row 10, all right? So let's go ahead, let's get row 12 completed. And I want to remind you, the orange square here, that's your repeat. So you would repeat everything that's within that square until you get down to the last stitch of this row. All right, I know you can do this, but I'm going to work it through one more time with you. All right, here we go. We start off row 12 with a chain 1. It does not count as a stitch. So then we will single crochet in the next 8 single crochets. In the 8th one, remember we're going to change colors because the next stitch is where we want to cluster. So let me go ahead and grab my yarn here that I'm going to be working my cluster in. Yarn over and pull through. Once again, I want to make sure I do my cluster. I think it looks better when I do my cluster over top of my color A. So I want to make sure that I do that in the next stitch and have my color A resting there, just like when I have my color B resting along. And the cluster is just like we've been doing all along, so I'm not going to talk through it. So we have 4 loops on there, drop my color B, pick up my color A, yarn over and draw through all of those, and we have our cluster. Now, if this were the blanket, I then would carry on working my single crochets on top of my color B. But I don't have to use my color B anymore for the rest of my swatch, so I can just cut my color B at this point. And that's what you would do when you get to the end of your particular blanket. So I just finish off my blanket or my row here with single crochets all the way to the end. But the repeat is the cluster and then 7 single crochets, and then cluster and then 7 single crochets. Pretty easy stuff. You guys can do this without any problem, I'm sure. Remember to always finish off into that chain stitch down there, and voila, we have a couple of clusters happening in this really great fabric. Row 13 is just like row 11. We're going to double crochet all the way back. So let's go ahead and get those double crochets into place. Voila, we have finished row 13, and now it's just a series of working repeats. You can see here on the chart that there are a multiple of rows written next to some of these rows. So after you get done with row 13, you then jump back down here to row 14 and you repeat row 14. Here's 15, here's 16, here's 17. And then for row 18, that's a repeat of row 10. Okay, so you can see here row 18 is a repeat of row 10. Pretty easy stuff going on. And then you repeat 19 through 21, which is just double crochets. So this entire section here is just made up of these double crochet rows and the single crochet and cluster rows. Now that you know how to work those clusters with the two colors and carrying the color B along the row as you're working with color A, you can easily complete this section. Because of that, I'm gonna call this section a wrap, jump to the next section, which is the final one that we need to learn for this mud cloth blanket. So if you're ready, I'm ready to jump in. Let's get up to row 22. Looking at row 22 here on the chart, you can see that we're still using color A because we're in this really pretty blue color still, right? And as you come across these stitches, we know what they are. They're all single crochets, right? But you might be distracted a little bit by this curly circle around the stitch. What I want to tell you is that circle actually is completed when we are up here on this row. So pay no attention to the circle at this point because that circle or partial circle is a front post treble crochet. We will work those front post treble crochets on row 25. We will drop down all the way down here to row 22 to work that front post treble crochet. That's why it looks a little goofy right there. So on row 22, we're with color A and we're single crocheting all the way across. 23 and 24, we're using color B, and again, we're just single crocheting all the way across both of those rows. You do not have to cut your yarn when you transition from color A to color B right here, okay? We're gonna float our yarn up along the side because we are ending our row that we're using color B on the same side that we ended with color A, so we can just transition our yarn up the side and then hide it with the border, okay? So let's recap. We're gonna single crochet all the way across row 22, single crochet all the way across row 23, single crochet across row 24. When we get to row 25, we're back to color A. We will chain one, single, 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 and then we come to this symbol right here. And this symbol, I don't know, it's kind of hard to see here, but it's like a slash and it comes up and it has a top hat and then there's two slashes. All right. So if we were to ignore that bottom part, we know what that symbol is. That's a treble crochet, right? We know that because there's two slashes. We're going to yarn over our hook twice. This little funny looking thing down here, that's new to us. Well, it makes sense when you think of it as we're going to be going around the post of a stitch. So rather than the treble crochet, which is right here, just pointing down to the stitch that it's going into, we have this sort of hook that goes around the stitch that we're going to be going around the post of. It really makes a lot of sense as you're making the stitches, but it looks goofy when you're looking at the chart. So when we're on row 25, we will single, 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 and then the next stitch will be this front post treble crochet all the way down here into the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th stitch on the 22nd row. And then we are back up here, we single, 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 and then we're going to front post treble crochet again to the next stitch over on the 22nd row. And then the next stitch over, we jump again and jump again. Can you see what this is going to do? We're going to get this really cool look of lattice type stitches happening on the blanket. Once we get past row 25, then it's a single crochet row on 26, single crochet on 27 with color B, single crochet on 28 with color B. And when we get back to row 29, we have these front post trebles again. And now we're going to do a front post treble around the same stitch we did the front post treble in on the last time we did the trebles. And it creates this really great diamond look. This really is a simple stitch pattern that packs a lot of textural bang. So let's work through these rows of single crochets and get to the part where we're supposed to do the front post trebles, because that's where you probably need the most instruction. So we're still with color A. Let's work across the row with single crochets for row 22. Remember that chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, so each stitch along this row will get its very own single crochet. At the end of the row, I want to make sure I transition or change colors to my color B in the last stitch. And then row 23 and 24 are just single crochets, but I will be using my color B. I will also not be cutting my color A. I will have it float up along the outside of the row, and I'll show you what I mean when I get to that point. But right here at the end of the row 22, when I work this last single crochet, I want to make sure I change colors. So I'm going to go back to my yellow again, and let's see how those stitches look in yellow. So I transition, I'm back to my color B, turn my work, and then the next 2 rows, I'm going to chain 1 and single crochet down and back. But I am not cutting my color A. I'm going to let it just hang out there. All right. So I start off with my chain 1 and then single crochet. Don't forget, at the end of row 24, we need to change color. So we will yarn over, pull up a loop in that last stitch, drop our color B, pick up our color A, and it's coming from a couple rows below, okay? So it's just still attached. Yarn over your hook and pull through with your color A. Make sure that your float, what's going from where it was attached down here to up here, is not super tight, or this side of your blanket will begin to pucker. We start off row 25 with a chain 1, so you can chain 1 and turn, or turn and chain 1, either way, whatever works. We will single crochet then in the first 3 single crochet. So 1, 2, and 3. And now we are coming to the stitch where we need to do the front post treble crochet, all right? And we will work that treble crochet front post stitch into one of the stitches down here that we worked on row 22. It's actually the 6th single crochet in from 3 rows down. So it was row 22. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this stitch right there, we are going to do a front post treble. So yarn over your hook twice to prepare it for the treble crochet. Come all the way over here where the stitch is that we want to work around. You will insert your hook from the right side of the stitch, around the back, and out the left side. And that's if you're right-handed. It's opposite if you're left-handed. We will yarn over our hook and then follow that same path back. We're going to go out the left, go behind the stitch, and come out the right. So we have 4 loops on our hook, and now we just complete our treble crochet. Yarn over, draw through 2, yarn over, draw through 2, yarn over, draw through 2. So we've completed our treble. Now what we will do is we will single crochet in each of the next 4 single crochet. But remember, do not work into this next single crochet, because that one stitch we just did is represented into that stitch. So you don't want to work into that one. We want to work into the next one, okay? So I will do a single crochet into the next one and into the following 3. So it's a total of 4 single crochet. And those 4 are on the same row. So make sure you don't work the stitch that's behind that front post treble crochet you did. And now we're to the point in the chart where we have another front post treble crochet. And this time we're going to go this direction and we're going to work it around that stitch right there. It's the one right next to the one we just worked into. So we yarn over our hook twice, come over here again from the right side, around the back, come out the left side, yarn over, follow that same path back, and then complete your treble crochet. Pretty simple, right? After you complete that second front post treble crochet, you've completed your repeat. So let's take a look at the chart with the orange square once again. And so I'm going to pick this up so we can make sure that it's not super blurry. And what we've done here is we've worked this front post treble. This is the one we just completed. And you'll notice that our square here for this section is smaller than this one. So the repeat here is just this area here. So then we would go back, and the next stitch after this one is a front post treble again, and then single crochet into 4 stitches, and then a front post treble. And you would repeat that all the way to the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stitches. You would repeat this section. So as we're looking at the sample that we're working up, what we see here is this is 1 repeat, and so we would repeat this again, remembering that the stitch we just completed, this front post treble, it would be making up for this stitch, okay, the first stitch after that single. The next stitch we work, which is our front post treble again, would take the place of that stitch. And it's important to point out, because if you don't skip those 2 stitches right there, because they're already represented by the stitches that we're doing, you'll accidentally increase your stitches along the row, and you don't want to do that. So what we're going to do here is I've yarned over twice to prepare my hook for the treble. I am going to count over 4 single crochets from where I started the last one. So that's where I started. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And in the next one, this 5th one, I'm going to do a front post treble in around that single crochet right there. So I've gone around, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then complete my treble crochet. All right. And this is the part where I'm going to make sure I skip that single, and I'm going to place my next stitch into that one right there. You see that? So that one would be the first, let's see, this treble, front post treble. This one is the front post treble I just completed. And now I'm going to do my single crochet in the next 4. I'm to the point where I need to do another front post treble. So I yarn over my hook twice, come over here, it's the stitch right next to the one I did last time, go around the post, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then complete my treble crochet just like normal. Remember, it takes the place of that stitch right there. So I will go ahead and single crochet in the last 2 stitches of the row. Voila! Pretty simple, huh? Not so hard. The only thing to do now is work my next row back, which is single crochet all the way back. And because I skipped those stitches that were in yellow where I had my post stitches, I should still have the same stitch count that I started off with. So we are not changing colors yet. One way to know when you change color is when you're back to the end where the color is waiting for you. So I will turn my work, chain 1, and then single crochet all the way back. Remember, I'm going to change color on this last stitch on the row back. So I drop my color A. I can pick up my color B. It's kind of twisted around my work here, so I'm going to make sure. That's the hardest part about keeping all the yarn attached. Drop my color A, pick up my color B, yarn over, pull through. So make sure my float isn't super tight. And I'm ready to go ahead and carry on with my color B, which is just a couple rows of single crochets. And when I get back to where I change colors again, I'm on another front post treble crochet row, which is very similar to the row we just did, only this time it'll be easier to find the stitches you need to work around the post of because it's the same stitches that were post stitches before. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to get through these next 2 rows with my color B and then start back with my color A and do the front post treble crochet row once again. When you get to the end of your row 28, remember you need to change color again at the end of the row. So you'll drop your color B, pick up your color A, and then yarn over and draw through. And we're ready to begin row 29. So row 29 has us begin with the chain 1, and then we will single crochet in the first 5 stitches. You'll notice in the chart now, this is where we have the front post treble again, and it's going to be coming back this direction, and we're going to work it around that stitch right there. When we work this row of front post treble crochets, we could either work around the post of this treble crochet or along the top of this treble crochet. Marianne Forrestal wants us to work around the top because it makes it so that our stitches don't slide up and down the post. But if you were following along, you wanted to work around the post, you absolutely could do that. But because I want to make sure I'm doing what Marianne wants me to teach you, I'm going to show you how to work this post stitch into the top of that previous post stitch, all right? So what we are going to do is we will yarn over our hook twice to prepare it for the treble crochet. And this is the one we want to go around. So we either go around the post like so, or just around the top like that, okay? So I'm going to go around the top. Did you guys see how that worked? So the top is right here. It's where this row of single crochets worked into that. So I'm just working into that area. And then completing my treble crochet. All right? You see how that works up? It's pretty easy. And then the next thing I want to do is work a treble crochet over here, a front post treble crochet all the way over here to this stitch. All right. So I will yarn over my hook twice, come all the way over here to this one, again, working around the top because she wants us to work around the top, and complete my front post treble crochet. Pretty easy so far. Remember, these 2 treble crochets count as stitches. So on the next single crochet, we do not want to place it into those 2. We would place it into this one. That single crochet is represented by that post stitch. That single crochet is represented by the second post stitch we did. So now I would single crochet in the next 4 single crochet. See that? All right. So that is our repeat right here. This is our repeat section. If we're looking at our chart here with the orange, you can see where the orange is around that repeat section once again. All right. So we're just repeating, building these diamonds. So I can go ahead, finish off the row here. So I did my 4. So the next stitch would be a front post treble coming back over here to this. So I'm going to yarn over twice, come over here, work around the top of that one. And then yarn over my hook twice, come over here, work around the top of this one. Skip 2 singles, and then I will work singles to the end of my row because this would be the end of my blanket. If it were a repeat, I would just do my 4 singles. Make sense? It's pretty easy stuff. Hopefully that makes sense to you. You can see where you make those front post treble crochets. It's really not super difficult. If you are having trouble finding where the top of those post stitches are to create the next post stitch, you can just work around the body of the post stitch. It's okay. It's just going to make it a little bit different. But those are the stitches you need to know to make this really beautiful blanket. The rest of the blanket is just a combination of those stitches, repeating rows, repeating stitches. So you know how to read the chart. So what you would do now is take the written word and follow along where it tells you to work rows, 1 through 5 times or whatever it may be. Let's actually take a look at the pattern and I can explain to you more precisely what I mean. We just completed row 29 and you can see here in the rest of the written instructions, it's listed out row for row what you're supposed to do. So once you complete row 29, for rows 30 through 32, you repeat rows 26 through 28. So you would come over here, find row 26 through 28 and repeat those. Or if you're using the chart, let me see here, you can go back to the chart and find rows 26, 27, and 28 and repeat, okay? All you're doing here with the words as they're written is following along with the repeat sections as they're indicated here, okay? So let's see, that put you through row 28, row 33, it has written out instructions. It's also in the chart. 34 and 36, it's the same repeat. We know what that is in the chart. 37 and 38 are row 29 and 30. Again, in the chart, so we know what we're supposed to do here because the chart takes you all the way through row 38. It's after row 38 where stuff gets interesting because that's when you begin to transition and work some of the other stitch patterns once again. So you can see here rows 39 through 53, we repeat rows 7 through 21. Well, what was row 7 and 21? Let's take a look at the chart. Row 7 was when we were doing just double crochets after we did our wave. And then through 21 right here, that's our cluster stitches again. Pretty cool. And then we can see that rows 54 through 58, we repeat rows 2 through 6. What's 2 through 6? Oh, it's our wave pattern again. Pretty easy. We're back to the wave pattern. We know how that works. And you will then go 59 through 62. It says you do rows 3 through 6. That's the wave pattern again. And then 63 through 118, you go through the whole thing again. You do rows 3 through 58. So it's like you double the entire piece once again. So can you see what I mean? By looking at the chart, you get to really get a visual of where the stitches need to go, how they are created, and what they happen to look like. And then once you get through the process of how all that works, you use the written word to tell you how many repeats you need to do to make the pattern that you are following along with. It's just a repeat of rows that we just learned. Now, this was a very long video and very intense because these stitches, they're basic stitches. You should know these stitches if you are an advanced beginner, intermediate crocheter. But it might be that this is the first time you've ever really looked at a chart to see how the chart coincides with the words. And I hope that you were able to follow along with me and understand what the symbols look like, how they are worked together in the chart, and how you transition from one row to the next, find out when you're supposed to change colors when you're working with a chart like this one, and so on and so forth. I really do hope you found it useful because I know I did. It's so much easier for me to see where I am in a chart than trying to find what word I left off on in a particular row. I get stumbled all the time. It takes me like triple the amount of time to finish a pattern. So if you have never used a chart before, why not give it a try this time? You have the words there to help you along if you get stuck, but this is a great opportunity for you to try out a chart. You never know. You might be going in uncharted waters and find out that you really enjoy crochet charts and your whole world will be blown up and excited, and you will be able then to check out Russian charts, Japanese charts, Korean charts, German charts. There's so many different crochet charts out there and they all use the same symbols. So when you see the symbol for a double crochet in a Russian chart, you'll know, oh, I'm supposed to put a double crochet right there, and you'll get a really cool stitch pattern. The last thing you need to know regarding this blanket is making sure that you weave in those ends really nice and neat. I do have a great video here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel showing you how to bury your ends, so I'll make sure to put a link to that in the video description box right below and in that little I button there so that you can see how to weave in your ends. And then you finish off the entire blanket with single crochets all the way around the blanket. You should not need me to show you how to do that because you've done single crochets by this point. At the end of the day, it's just single crocheting around an entire blanket, but it is the perfect finishing touch because it gives you that little bit of a border around this really fun blanket. We've learned how to do this really awesome wave pattern, how to work these clusters, and you can see that the yarn is carried along right behind there, okay? And when you make these clusters, they're gonna pop through on the wrong side because that's gonna be, I'm not gonna say on the wrong side, they're gonna pop through on the opposite side that you're making them because that's where they're supposed to be. So these clusters are going to pop out and be great. And then last but not least, you learn how to kind of do, I'm gonna call it the lattice, but this is really great lattice look using those front post treble crochets. It adds a really great amount of texture, and by working them into the top of the stitch, it doesn't let that stitch travel down the post. So that was a really unique touch that Marianne Forrestal added to this pattern. And then as we talked about going through the repeats, you just work through these repeats and you get all of the different stitch patterns until you get to the very end. Let me show you the single crochet border so you can see here. It's just basic single crochets all the way around the blanket. I think this blanket is super cute and modern and cool. Can you tell I sort of coordinated with it today? I thought that the mustard yellow sweater looked really awesome with the mod sort of look of this blanket. Hopefully you had an appreciation for that as well. I'm Marley Bird, and I'm excited to be here and be able to help you become better crocheters, more knowledgeable, and maybe just push your limits a little bit further with crochet charts and making this really great, wonderful blanket. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you for making it all the way to the end. I know it was super long, but it was worth it. I think you'll agree with me. All right, guys, make sure you smash that like button, and I will talk to you again soon. I'm Marley Bird, proud national spokesperson for Red Heart Yarns, and I'll talk to you later. Bye. I guess I already said that. Congratulations, you made it to the end of the video. Make sure you check out some other really wonderful videos right here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. I've picked a couple out right down there below. Be sure to smash that like button and hit subscribe so you know whenever I release a new video. You don't want to miss out on the fun. Bye, guys.